Hello again, nerds and nerdettes, to another chapter in the story of Harriet's survival. On the last episode, we received a rhino, survived numerous attacks, developed our production, and caught sleeping sickness. Today, we pick up our tale where we left off, which is trying to overcome this illness. At 1500 on the 8th of August, Harriet gets out of bed to pick the cotton fields. Halfway through her harvest, she moves to tend to herself and subsequently returns to farming. At level 3, her plant skill is only halfway to her ability to plant healroot, so we'll have to barter or scavenge meds ASAP. Harriet ends the night with a meal, some playtime, meditation, and cloth hauling. By dawn of the next morning, our colonist steps outside to continue collecting her cloth and starts making herself some more refined clothing. After a bite to eat, the psychic soothe ends and she goes to grab the last of the cloth to her stockpile. As we check on her sickness, she's about 2/3 of the way to immunity. As midnight approaches, she heads to bed with her tailoring objectives complete and 72% immunity. Before long, we receive our first quest of this chapter. Alokal, prisoner of the kinship of Krika, calls for rescue. He's guarded by one enemy and an unknown threat. Harriet is not a fan of risking life and limb to unknown dangers, even less so when the rewards offer her no details on their potential benefits or hindrances. With so little reassurance that this trip will be worthwhile, Harriet decides to pass this opportunity, especially given how far it is from our base. On the world map, Harriet notices the quest for the 3 advanced components guarded by the 2-man hunting chinchillas nearby. It is rather tempting, but she still needs to recover, get electric power, add a second colonist, and achieve more objectives, so she will most likely pass this opportunity as well. On the following morning, Harriet needs tending once again. Given how much farther ahead her immunity gain is leading the illness, she decides to conserve precious resources and tends to herself without medicine. Moments after sweeping her floors and getting some bed rest, a mad rat sets itself upon our colonist's home.
You die soon.
Perhaps a little carelessly, Harriet leans out the door to take a quick shot,
I'll take head spine for my trophy back.
and a few kicks later crushes the invasive little skaven. On the 11th, at 7 o'clock, the rice fields have fully matured and Harriet gathers it to her stockpile. Hours later, she tends to herself one last time and finishes sowing the fields. In the earliest hours of the next day, Harriet has finally gained immunity to her sleeping sickness. Without hesitation, she immediately marches out to a project. The first thing we'll have her do with her recovery is dismantle the northeastern ruin of steel to stockpile materials. Our colonist also decides to save the 2 1x2 tables to replace the 2x2 table currently in our shelter. The reasons for this is a 2x2 table can only seat 8 people at most and can only be placed in one shape in one spot. 2 1x2 tables, on the other hand, can accommodate the same arrangement as well as others. If lined up, they could seat 10 pawns, or if placed in different rooms, can seat 6 people per location. I like keeping my options open. In addition, they are damaged, therefore repairing them will level our construction skills so we can build security traps. While Harriet continues this project, she receives another quest. Julian Coas is deserting the Empire of God, which is the heavily armed and armored royalty faction on the map. Once again, we're given no information on what he's equipped with in terms of gear or skills. I would be willing to bet his pursuer, being a member of the Empire of God, is most certainly well armed. I also suspect that if we went to hostilities with the Empire, that we would lose their quests, which I would like to continue exploring. So, for now, we decline to take part in this uprising. As planned, Harriet has finally attained level 3 in construction. With this milestone, she can finally construct security traps and immediately places them at the southern entrance, where she will hereby bait enemy attackers since it's away from Hypergig's resting area, our internal equipment, and the farm. Furthermore, we will be using wood to build them, as it is a plentiful resource on the map and its accumulation will level our plant skill, bringing us closer to being able to grow our own medicine. In the early twilight hours of the 13th, Harriet scavenges another dead monkey. A few hours later, she's stockpiling wood. More time passes, and Harriet sets herself to work resowing the cotton fields, since most of her previous supply was used on her first set of clothing. If a second colonist should join, we want to be ready to gear them up for the environment as well. Randy interrupts this process, however, by besetting Hypergig with the flu. Animals tend to do a bit better than colonists in terms of gaining immunity, so we will start tending to him without meds. Should the illness begin passing his immunity early on, then we will use our meds. Unfortunately, animal sleeping spots cannot be set to medical. Harriet wanted to make an animal bed, which can be set as such. However, she has an inadequate number of materials to produce such furniture. In hindsight, I could have possibly made patch leather with the tailoring bench, but oh well. As we monitor Hypergig's condition closely, the immunity is indeed barely moving faster than the flu itself, but later turns against our favor. To give his immunity a much-needed boost, we set his next tend to herbal meds. Well into the morning of Juggust the 14th, Harriet can finally begin researching hydropower in earnest. Later that day, after scavenging a dead chinchilla, Harriet hears cargo pods drop in the distance. 74 units of fresh milk land across the river.
Got milk?
Naturally, Harriet is not going to pass up free calcium. Just as she approaches the buckets of mammary juice, Randy expresses his impatience with Harriet for ignoring so many offers of new colonists and decides to just stick her with one. Before we can inspect the colony's new addition, we must name our faction and settlement. In honor of my remaining mods who volunteer so much time and energy to my Twitch channel, we will name the faction Pixie's Dynasty and the settlement of Ark's Banning Salon. Now, let's look at our newcomer. Paul Kazacek, born a medieval slave and grew up to be a medieval sailor, is a mixed bag of pros and cons. He's incapable of skilled labor, meaning he cannot truly assist in building up the colony. That said, he's adept with animals and people. At the bare minimum, he can haul and clean. So for what it's worth, he can at least help maintain the base and negotiate on Harriet's behalf. It also helps that he's a he. Perhaps Harriet will find love out here with her Slavic counterpart, which could generate significant mood boosts for them both. His chemical interest could potentially be disruptive, but he has a great memory to reduce skill decay and is kind, which will further enhance his cohesion in the colony and with trades. On the health tab, we see a mildly painful scar. Perhaps this is something he and Harriet can bond over. As Harriet returns with the majority of the milk, Paul, who I'll rename in the following episode, equips the shirt that Harriet had previously tailored and goes to feed Hypergig. Hypergig is still barely keeping ahead of his illness, so we will continue providing him with herbal medicine. With the addition of the extra colonist, it's time to give them each their own bedroom, so they don't disturb each other's sleep. This construction project will be merged with the tidying up of our outer walls to create a more organized structure. Early on the 15th of Juggust, a mad cobra assails the surviving duo. Looks like it's time to put our traps to good use. While renovating the southern wall, Harriet receives a request from Dame Monique Anpladio of the Empire of God for an exotic human specimen. Oh boy. Lord only knows what she wants to do with that person, but I wouldn't mind getting some basic psychic powers on our colonists. Since Paul can't actually improve the base in any meaningful way, and he's so sociable, we'll send him to be locked in the Milady's sex dungeon while Harriet continues progressing her base design. The shuttle, however, does not leave for 24 hours, so we'll make the most use of Paul before he egresses by having him continue hauling materials to the construction site, cleaning the base, and training Hypergig. Speaking of our weaponized unicorn, his immunity is still barely ahead of the illness, thus it appears we will deplete our medical reserves to keep him alive. Moments later, the artificial fog event from the previous episode's quest fades and ranged weapon accuracy can return to normal. As night settles in, Paul takes off, undoubtedly dreading what sort of maniacal Slaneshian kink this bourgeoise dame has in store for him. On the 1st of September, Harriet manages the rice fields and aggregates lumber for her base development. By midday of the 2nd, she has completed the finishing touches on the bedrooms, outer walls, defenses, and consolidated the decor. With this project finalized, Harriet returns to studying for the watermill generator. She takes a recess from her research to give Hypergig one last tend to guarantee his restoration. Randy celebrates Hypergig's survival with a beautiful omen from the firmament, and cargo pods containing 104 units of chem fuel rain from the sky. We will most likely stockpile the chem fuel to be used later for mortar shells. At dawn of the 3rd, after having scavenged some fresh kills from the jungle, Harriet sets out to hunt a nearby chinchilla for meat and continued stockpile of its valuable fur.
One eternity later.
That night, as Harriet rests, a steel meteorite crashes to the northwest. At some point, I'd like to separate the stockpile from the rooms to beautify the interior. In the short term, we can at least move steel outdoors, since it does not deteriorate in the elements. Harriet spends most of September 4th researching. At 1900 hours, a royal tribute collector from the Empire of God arrives in unison with a raid from the kinship of Krika. The collector normally accepts gold and prisoners for favor, which we have none of. However, we can still make use of them, as they are heavily armed. The same cannot be said of the raiders. Bitol and Beaver foolishly march right into our Imperial Guard. Harriet exits her bunker when the danger has passed to expand her mass grave.
But I'm not done yet!
Just a few hours later, 2 more Thrumbos, possibly the same ones from one of the previous episodes, migrate through the area. What better time could there be to engage them when we have such reinforcements at our doorstep? The Thrumbos roam right up to the river's edge opposite of our escort. Harriet pricks the first one, which immediately turns to charge her. The Imperials react instantly and launch a barrage of bullets across the water. With the first Thrumbo dealt with, Harriet moves to get the last one's attention. Unfortunately, she does not have the river to slow the Thrumbo from closing in with her, so this might be a close one. She does manage to intercept with her reinforcements, but takes a couple friendly rounds to the torso and lung in the crossfire. After a brutal saturation of projectiles, the second Thrumbo is finally incapacitated. Harriet, having tended to her wounds, hunts down the beasts to fulfill a successful engagement. A part of me had hoped one or two of the guards would have dropped their weapons for us to commandeer, but I won't complain with the amount of meat, fur, and horns we just acquired. Harriet's first Thrumbo butcher yields 1 horn, 48 leather, and 144 meat. Since we are without a freezer, we will try to delay the butcher of the second Thrumbo as long as its corpse remains fresh to extend the meat's shelf life. When all's been said and done, the Royal Tribute Collector vacates the area. I cannot think of a better place to end this chapter of Harriet's survival. Thank you very much for staying through to the end. As usual, please consider guiding the algorithm to my humble corner of the internet by liking and subscribing. I am not at all fond of constantly panhandling for validation, but it's the necessary evil to YouTube progression. For links to the inspirational YouTuber, the quality of life mods, my Twitch channel, my Instagram for photos and videos of the puppies from the animal rescue, and the intro-outro song, please visit the video description. I'm interested in your reactions and or advice, so feel free to populate that comment section. As always, guys and girls, I hope you are safe, healthy, and fulfilled. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.